Welcome to another episode of the Special Education Technology Center's podcast called Awe and Wonder. And our series two is all about leaders and change makers. So we're really excited to have our special guest today. But before we get to Caroline, we'll introduce ourselves and then let her introduce herself. And although most of you are going to really recognize this amazing person, but you can hear more from her. So I'm Sarah Kinsella.
And I'm Brenda Del Monte. And Caroline, why don't you just for the one person who's lived under a rock for the last 50 years, tell them who you are.
Yep. Well, so I haven't actually prepared this, but I have been working in this field with people who use AAC since the mid 70s. So we've passed 45 years, and I'm really passionate about it. I've been really lucky to work in schools and hospital clinics and Head Start and universities and private practice and lots and lots and lots of work with families in their homes also. So the other thing I think has been really fun for me is that I've gotten to work with people sometimes for maybe not constantly, but intermittently for decades. So I have people I've worked with who were, 5 or 6 the first time I met them, and now in their 30s. And so I just feel like there's an enormous amount of, I don't know if I call it institutional knowledge, but just that long-term seeing, and also seeing how sometimes people don't make enormous progress for a while, and then something changed in their life, and things just really pick up and they move way, way forward. And just the idea that it's never too late. I think, doing this for so long has given me just a really cool perspective on the fact that change is possible always and forever.
What an intro.
Yeah, and yeah, so neat. What a neat perspective that you have to see people along the continuum of their life. And when you began, what is your background? What training?
So I have a undergraduate in English, which helps because I write a lot of books, and I just love literature, and which has helped me with everything. Being a writer helped me with grant writing and everything. And then, but while I was an undergraduate, I knew I wanted to be a speech pathologist, and so there wasn't an undergraduate program at UNC Chapel Hill. So I took lots of classes that got me ahead in the master's program, and I got my master's. And then we moved to West Virginia, and I was working as a clinical supervisor, and then got a wonderful grant, the West Virginia Foundation Fellowship, to get my doctorate in speech language pathology, but have a minor in special ed for students with, at that point we talked about severe profound, but with individuals with really complex challenges. And so that was in the 70s, in the late 70s, early 80s. So that's
okay. Wow. Okay. Well, and I have to ask, so you were in undergrad studying English. You said you knew you wanted to be a speech and language pathologist. How did you know? What was it?
So, well, when as a child, as a young person, I did volunteer work with people with disabilities, probably because my dad was totally blinded during World War II. He was in Burma, and wonderful article about him. He made the cover of the Saturday Evening Post in an article about his blindness and how he'd gone on to go to graduate summa cum laude from Bowdoin and then go to law school. And so I had this vision of disability not stopping everything from my home. And so I did a lot of volunteering, tutoring with people with disabilities in high school. And then when I went to college, my freshman year, I volunteered at a Murdoch Center, which was a center for individuals with significant, a residential center with a significant intellectual impairment.
Okay.
I was the only person to ever come back for the second year. So they made me care of the volunteers, because it's like, oh, you're back. That never happens. And put me on the most challenging area. And so I'm working with a young woman who had spina bifida. She was blinded because of her spina bifida. She had one limb that was working, and she was fabulous personality, really fun. But this is what made me, she was a talker. She was like really lovely conversationalist. But every time I would go visit her, she'd say, "Hey, can we take Linda with us?" Well, you can't even imagine how tough things were. This was in 1970. And so she always wanted me to take Linda with her. Linda didn't even have a wheelchair. Cheryl was one of the really lucky ones that had a wheelchair, but her friend Linda didn't have a wheelchair. And so she's some wonderful person who was mechanic, or, the person who fixed stuff at the center, had made a wheelchair. Exactly. MacGyver had made her. So he'd taken a 4x4 plywood board and he'd put a sling chair on the back of it and then put casters on it. And so she could get up and be pushed around. But it was really, really hard to push her around. You can imagine. I mean, we're talking about casters that are all going in different directions. And every time I got there, Cheryl said, "Okay, let's go to the sunroom," because that's the only place she could feel the sunshine on her face. It was really important. And it was, if I just push Cheryl, it's a 5-minute walk. But if I'm pushing Cheryl and pulling and tugging Linda's, it took a really long time. And I didn't get it. And remember, I'm like 19. And I just thought, why does she want to take Linda every time? I mean, what a horrible person I was. But I guess this is just 19-year-olds, right? Very self-absorbed. And, this is making it much harder. And then one time I got there and Linda was sobbing. And I said, "Oh, what's wrong with Linda?" Because I hadn't seen Linda show any kind of communication because I was young and naive. And Cheryl said, "Oh, Marcus died." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." And right then I'm like, "Oh, she gets it that Marcus." And I'm saying, "Is Marcus someone on another ward?" And she's like, "No, on One Life to Live." Okay, so now there's another layer.
Right. You've learned
that someone died. She's upset that someone died on a sitcom. I mean, a
soap opera.
Yeah, soap opera. But then I started thinking and I thought, wait a minute, they're in this ginormous ward. They're so far apart. Linda doesn't talk at all. Cheryl doesn't see. How does Cheryl know about Linda? How did they become friends? And so I asked Cheryl and she said, "Oh, well, I love to watch One Life to Live, and so does Linda, but the staff watched Days of Our Lives. And so Linda can tell time and I can't see the clock. So when it's 2:30, she starts to vocalize to tell them to turn it. And if they don't, I say, until you turn it, she's not going to stop. And I've told her be really loud. And so she gets really loud. So they worked out this brilliant plan. And now I have to realize all the unbelievable potential that I had not presumed. What an incredible life lesson.
Wow.
But it made me, and I want to tell you the story and then I set up a communication system for Linda and it was amazing, but I didn't know anything about communications. I just knew that I wanted to do something. And then Linda died. And so I never got a chance to help her find her voice. And so I decided to go into speech therapy and see if I could be the person who can make that difference and make that change. And
wow.
I'm sorry, that was a really long story, but it's that's my why.
Well, that's exactly what we want to hear about. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. And what an amazing partnership they had.
Isn't it it's such a rich and amazing, I mean, I feel like I made it up, but I promise I didn't. It's so cool.
That is cool.
Well, and goes to show that those with limitation in any area, they recognize the strengths in others, right? So yeah. Wow. Yeah.
And I was so appalled that I had done the same thing that had bothered me with my dad. There's this generalization of disability. We'd go out to eat and people would turn to my mom and say, "What does he want?" And she's like, "I don't have a clue. You're going to have to ask him." And they just assume that because he's blind, he doesn't talk, he doesn't understand. And then that was that, oh my gosh, hit your head against the wall moment for me thinking, I did that to Linda. And so it was just a huge life shifting event that a paradigm shift that I have tried really hard. And I'm not saying I've always been successful, but it has made me know that we've got to stop making assumptions and we've we've got to do a better job. And I, of course, didn't know the name for that, of presuming potential, which I prefer over presumed competence, because I feel like when we say presumed competence, then we get pushback like, yes, well, I did a test and she can't do that, so we can't presume that she's competent. But if we presume potential, we don't know. And I find that in any one classroom, for example, if I presume potential in every single student, by the end of that year, I may not see growth that's really significant in every single student, but I will see growth in multiple students and sometimes people that I wouldn't have expected, which I think is really, really helpful for teachers and therapists and parents to say, we can't make that guess on who is going to make pretty rapid success. But if we presume potential for everyone, we're going to be surprised by some of your students and in a really happy way.
I think presuming potential keeps people problem solving, keeps people creative, keeps people thinking outside the box. I do think presumed competence, I understand why all that has taken off and there's a space for that. But just because they're competent it means that they have potential for the next step. I mean, every competency leads to the next step, which they're not yet competent at because they haven't learned it yet. So that potential piece is
that's such a great way to explain it. I really like that. And I agree 1,000%.
Yeah. So I am just interested to find out what are some guiding principles that have stayed regardless of all the advancement in technology? And I'm asking that because, I mean, you have the advancement in technology, we're talking rotary phone at best, right?
Absolutely. And when I started, I mean, I remember seeing Rick Creech present in 1978, I think it was, and he's using a device with a head stick and he's putting in 3-digit codes, and he has about 150 being Rick Creech, he probably had 500, but a bunch of codes he had in his head that would give out sentences or words, and just an amazing talk. And so I think presuming potential is the one that has never changed. That has nothing to do with technology. So that's one of them. I also, I've kind of named it recently, but I think I've always believed it. And that's sort of the 3 E's of instruction that I talk about, and that it needs to be effective. I mean, the first thing, I don't care how much fun it is. If you're not using, let's try evidence-based practice. Sometimes we know things that aren't yet evidence-based, and we may make them evidence-based, but being authentic, that our goals are authentic. I mean, I just have seen so much, so many times students doing things that are so inauthentic, and they're not bought in because it's ridiculous, it's stupid, and they know it. And I also, another real major principle to me is not talking down to students. And I know that's really obvious, but it's 2023 and I still see it happening. It's mind-boggling. And I'm telling you, kids are so smart that particularly some of the students that I work with who have Angelman syndrome and Rett syndrome, they will not tolerate that. They have a really high, I'm trying to think of a better word, I'm trying to use not a polite word, baloney meter. They have such a powerful baloney meter. And if you're having to do something that's stupid, or if you're talking down to them, they're happy. Done. But it's to their detriment, because what happens is people think they can't. They don't realize that they're like, no, I'm not doing that because it's really stupid. And by the way, I did it for you yesterday and the day before and the day before. And if you haven't learned your colors by now, lady, maybe you need glasses. So they're just not going to accept it. So that's one. So that's the effective, and me also including authentic, efficient, because I see sometimes we just don't have a lot of time there's so much to learn and so little time. So I really want to figure out how we can be efficient. And that doesn't mean rushing people. It just means not wasting time. Like always having great activities for that sponge time when you plan something that fell through, or you have an activity you're going to do and the internet's is not playing nicely. I mean, there's always problems that come up. And so having those sponge activities, I think, is another example of efficiency. But then the third one is engagement. And there's almost everything we do can be more engaging. And but not at the cost of something real, like we are doing something that matters.
Right.
It's authentic. We are not wasting a lot of time in whatever we're doing to make it fun. It's not like, let's spend 30 minutes on something we could have taught in 3. That's not what I'm saying. Just saying, how can we take something that's effective and efficient and now add in that, that fun factor? So,
and what I love about that is that one of your E words is not entertainment.
No.
You
exactly.
know what I'm saying? Because there is like literacy entertainment that actually isn't instructional.
Absolutely. It's
the difference the difference between entertainment and actual learning is that it's engagement. Entertainment is passive.
Right.
And engaging is not passive. I can't think of the word.
It has that interaction piece. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Active.
Yes.
Engagement is active.
Yes.
And entertainment is passive. And so if it looks like everyone's sitting around doing nothing, it's entertainment.
Right. Exactly.
If there's participation, if there's engagement, if people are even if they're mad, they're engaged. Right? If people have feelings, thoughts, and emotions about what's happening, it's active. And that's when learning's happening, right?
And you had another one you did about the buy-in. The teacher, April, really talked about that very eloquently. So I'm just putting a little shout out to another of the Awe and Wonder podcasts.
Oh, that was from the last series. A teacher.
Yeah.
From that. Yeah.
Yeah. April Whitecamp. How nice. Yeah. Well, those 3 are certainly, those are here to stay, right? Those are
I hope
wonderful.
so. They're not technology dependent. Right. I mean, I can't tell you how AAC devices and computers have changed. I mean, in 1982, we got one of the early Apple IIe computers, and we were able to take the lid off and put an EEPROM card and burn chips to put into the Wolf device, so that instead of having 36 pages, you now had hundreds of pages of and was that the very best way to do it? No, we have better ways now. But my point is, we went from that to digital speech, where kids now had 32 seconds of speech. It was just like so a lot of times we see things that kind of are backups for a while, and then later got better. But what we gave up, it felt like to me like the Little Mermaid, who gave up her voice for a good pair of legs. I feel like we gave up a lot along the way. And so we need to figure out how, when we make those steps forward, that we're really careful not to we can't go back to go forward. We have to figure out how to go forward and take what we already had and integrate it.
Right. Give an example about that. I want an example about that.
Yeah.
So the example was the Wolf communication device had ability to have literally thousands and thousands of words.
Okay.
And then we had digitized speech device, which theoretically could have 32 times 4 words or phrases, but you actually didn't have enough memory to do that. So that's a great example. But I also see, so we lost the IntelliTools keyboard, which was life-changing.
Yes, a lot of sadness around that.
Customize amazing tools. And also the PowerPad that you guys probably don't know, because once it only worked with the Apple IIe and 2GS. And once they were gone, it stopped working. But we don't have an interactive board that, I mean, I get that we have smart boards, but it's just not the same at all. They're not set up for our students with the most complex challenges where we can move things around. They're just not as powerful. So one more example, PowerPoint to Google Slides. PowerPoint for our students who have multiple challenges the animations are so powerful that we can really make a difference to our students with cortical visual impairment, our students who have problems with engagement. We can be a lot more interactive with PowerPoint than we can be with Google Slides. So that's and I'd probably have 10 more, but those are just.
I guess what you're saying is like, because you can kind of get attention deficit disorder, squirrel, you can kind of get where the new app comes out, the new thing comes out,
Mm-hmm.
and it finally has some feature you wanted. And then but you're missing that, but it doesn't have all this other stuff. And so it's like, ooh, is it worth losing that much vocabulary for that one feature? Is it like, what's the trade-off on that? And also, don't put all your eggs in that basket, because when that stops being made, when the technology changes, when the iOS is updated and that app stops working because that's not being supported or whatever.
Don't throw away your low tech.
Don't throw away your low tech. I mean, and I think that people coming into the field right now are super dependent on high tech in all areas of life. And we sound like old ladies by saying don't give up low tech, but the reality is that sometimes low tech is better, easier, and the most efficient way to communicate or to express, especially literacy stuff.
Absolutely, and I also think just saying that I think there's a sense of we have to have high tech, but don't worry. And I actually use the term light tech because I hate the term low functioning. It just makes me so angry when I hear somebody say someone's low. And I feel like that word low tech has equated to, well, the people with intellectual challenges only deserve low. I mean,
that you have to
a lot. So I use the word light tech. And I feel like I know that Linda Burkhart talks about how important it is that everybody needs light tech, and high tech is really desirable if that works out, but that we have to have light tech because there's so many times, how many times have we had the batteries die or the device is not working or we are, we were going to the beach or, it's good luck in the bathtub or in the pool. I just look at families who've gotten, I have one of my Pinterest boards that I haven't done a good job keeping up with, but it's AAC all day long, just showing families who have light tech boards, like inside the shower, but it's on the outside and inside so they can use it. And on a paddle board so we can take it, and just on the bicycle they've added it, and just all these kinds of really creative things that families are doing to make sure that their students have their voices with them 24/7, that they really have it. I remember a family who, and this is a long time ago, and we would do it differently now, but they actually got a slide projector and had stories that we'd taken slides of different stories, and then the little girl could lie, and they had a mirror and a reflector from the slide projector, so the slides on the ceiling, I actually have a tip about it, and the little girl could watch her favorite book, could read her favorite book by just hitting, I think she did this with her hand because which was behind her when she's lying in bed and isn't very good, when she can do all kinds of things in the wheelchair, but she's positioned perfectly with the lap tray, but without it, she couldn't read in bed. And her siblings could read in bed. And so they did that so she could read in bed. And the smile on her face when she's doing it is like, yes, I can read in bed now too.
Yes.
Sometimes it's simple tech. It's not necessarily it's light tech, simple tech, high tech. And I love high tech. It's wonderful too. But one of the things I'm doing is, this is my old iPad. And I have another iPad in a box. It's ready because I know there's an app that I now want to get. I just love the new version of Proloquo that Aaron Sheldon did. And I went out and bought the iPads because it won't work on my old iPad. But I'm keeping this puppy because there's a lot of things I use that are incredibly engaging and interactive that do not work. So that's the other thing, is you don't have to throw away sometimes you can keep the old technology and the new, and you don't have to make a choice, right? And I know Chris Bouguet says, love the oh gosh, characteristics, qualities, don't get stuck on the app, get stuck, think about what are the features. That's the word I was looking for. Love the features, don't just fall in love with the app. Which is hard, because I do say RIP Magic Toilet. I'm sorry, but the Magic Toilet where you ask a question and the answer flushes up.
Oh, I don't know that one.
It was like the best, most engaging, and talk about engaging, but you had to actually ask a question using your device before you got to hit the Magic Toilet.
Okay, well, Any app developers out there listening,
yes, please,
bring back
do that magic toilet. That's
Magic
right.
Toilet. Well,
So
another thing about the light tech, like you were saying, is it's also part of, student their sense of self and making choices, right? That they get to choose if they're
Yes,
doing
yes,
light tech, high tech. Um, and
absolutely.
and then you made me think too that it's part of it is creativity. We have to be so creative. Um, like our students are creative, like Linda and what was her name? Um, the other
Cheryl.
woman you were,
Yes, Linda
Cheryl.
and
yes,
Cheryl. Yeah,
yeah,
what
we're creative.
creativity. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I love
And
that.
I think that with with things like higher caseloads, more paperwork, just that creativity has lost something. And that's one of the things that I want to bring back. And I'm actually going to put that into my last answer. How can we help each other be more creative? Because I
Right.
think that, so Brenda and I did a session at Closing the Gap called Unleashing Your Creativity. And it was just so much fun to think about it and think about how do we want to do it. And it was really well attended. It was at the end when everybody's tired, they want to be at the exhibit hall, but people really want to unleash their creativity. So we need to figure out more ways to help that happen.
But I want to let's talk about that for a minute, because when I met you, you said, for everybody out there, I was actually just teaching something, and Carolyn Musslewhite sits in the back. So, I mean, if that doesn't make you forget everything you were supposed to say, I don't know what does. But anyways, at the end, we talked, and she said, "Oh, I'd like to, team with you." And her response, I'll never forget it for the rest of my life, Caroline. You said, "Well, what's hard? What's hard for you?" And I love that when as we think about leaders and change makers and mentorship and coaching and all these potential models of how to do things. What if it's almost that simple as somebody is struggling and you say, what's hard for you right now? Because it's like, what it made me do is I had to tell you what I thought was hard. And then it made me, because I'm verbalizing what I know is hard for me, I'm now invested. I'm now invested in getting better at that, in listening to what you have to say. If you come as a professional and you're talking, even if it's answering my question, if I hadn't had to think about what is hard for me and say it out loud and identify it, basically I'm Brenda Del Monte and I have a problem. I mean, like, you have to right? Like, let's start with
It's a little vulnerable, but but it's also saying what's hard for you, but you identified something that was hard for you that you really wanted. It wasn't just like, oh, paperwork's so hard, it's such a pain. You identified something that you wanted to learn and get better at and master and grow in, etc.
Right. So what I said was, I want transfer of skill. So I'll give an example, and they're using my example, but they're not applying it to the next book. Like I was doing literacy stuff. So I would
no generalization.
No generalization. And then you said, well, that actually requires creativity. So again, like, your experience is like, yeah, I know that that's not generalization, but when I think about how I've guided and coached adult learners through your career, it's because they're not free to be creative and try it a different way, and we've not given that permission. So it's funny, because I think I might have said this to you. I don't consider myself particularly creative, because I think of creative as being artistic and things like that. But when it comes to problem solving, I read a definition of creativity, and it was problem solving. I'm like, okay, I'm in. Now I guess I'm creative, right?
And you introduced our talk that way, and that was I hadn't really thought about it that way, and I think that's going to help me as a literacy coach, thinking about it as creativity is problem solving. And I find that. So one of the things I've done, for example, is when I'm doing coaching, is sharing the bright spots. So having people showing something one teacher's done and say, oh, this is so great. I saw this in Miss Jackson's room. It was amazing. And then we show that. And then other people are like, oh, I'd like her to show something I've done. And so they end up getting more creative and just, it's one of the ways that we can make real change. There's this wonderful book about change called Switch, How to Make Change When Change is Hard. It's by Chip and Dan Heath. And I just love it. And that's one of their three things is to, they have three things that are, the growing the kind of the left side of your brain and the rider and then the elephant smoothing the path. But one of the ways they've grown things is by identifying what's already working, what's working, and what's working in a place where it's not working for everybody. But it's working really well for this one teacher. And so I think that's just a really good way for us to think, is to identify, so all the teachers, everybody was doing something that I could share with. It might have been a teacher that wasn't having enormous success, but they were doing one thing that just really, really worked. And when I shared it, then that teacher, the next time I came in the classroom, was much more willing and much more open, and generally had tried to think of something else creative. We like praise, and I think it matters. I mean, we all, want to feel that we're doing something that that's worth sharing with somebody else, right?
Right.
My family grew up doing this thing called I can't remember what we called it, but it was the idea that I will tell you something somebody else said nice about you, and but you have to tell me something nice that somebody said about me first. And so basically we're playing that game where I'm saying something nice about you, but I'm saying it to other people. So that means it's really true, right? If I just praise you to your face, that's one level. But if I say something complimentary to a whole group, then that means I really believe it deeply. And it's a much higher level of praise. And so I trade last. That's what we call it, because I will trade last. My compliment for your compliment. And so it really made us listen to nice things people had said about other people. And it was just a really fun thing to do as a kid growing up. But I never realized till right now that that's why I started doing that. Complimenting is remembering how good it felt as a kid and wanting to, to share that with adult learners who don't get a lot of positive strokes. I mean, classroom teachers in special ed, classroom teachers, I can stop there, just don't often get, and I have a daughter and a husband, and my son used to be an elementary school teacher. My husband just retired after 15 years. My daughter is working really hard in New York, and in New York area, just making a difference every day. And I'm sure not getting those kudos every day. So how we can do that, but in a way that'll make change grow. It isn't just about saying something nice, it's about saying something nice to make the next bit of change happen. I think that's the secret.
And that it's genuine that way.
It's really genuine. It has to be genuine. If it's not genuine, don't bother. But you always find something. I've never been in a classroom where I couldn't find one thing to share with other people and hold up.
I love that. I'm writing that down.
It makes you think when I walk in this room, pay attention to what I can make a positive comment about. Because maybe you're invited, maybe we're invited because they're having a problem, because they need feedback, and that's going to be perceived as criticism, or that's going to be maybe feel judgmental. So it's like you walk in with the intent of paying attention to what they're already doing well.
That's that growing their bright spot, their own bright spot they can grow in their classroom, as well as growing it across the district when you share it with other people. But I also would send emails to the special ed director when people did particularly good things. I would take screenshots and send them, just like a really fast thing. And this particular special ed director, 0 times did she neglect to write back and give heap the praise on and show the administrative support. And she's so crazy busy, and yet she always found the time to respond to those emails and reach out to that teacher. Wonderful. And tell them how impressed she was. And I think that's huge. Again, getting that administrative. We always talk about top down, bottom up, right? That's where change happens, when we grow it from the teachers and therapists, but we also grow it from the administration down. And that we got to figure out ways to do a better job of that.
Yeah, I love that. I have a happy file. My mom taught me, she was an educator as well. And she said, when you start your first day at work, if there's anything that happens from now until forever, put it in a little file, whether it's a card from a kid or something someone said. And I have that. And it's important.
I did that with my children, but I haven't done that with work. I mean, I do take lots of screenshots and try to save them, but I love the happy file idea. That's brilliant. That's so great.
Yeah, that is. Yeah. So were you ever afraid of the technology as it advanced? Were you ever like, you know what, I'm on my way out, I don't need to learn this?
I would say not afraid, but sometimes overwhelmed. And I feel like I am not a cutting edge first adopter. I kind of wait a little bit and then I adopted. Me, like, I did not have the iPhone 1. Okay. I waited and right now I have a very old one too. So I don't have to have the latest and greatest, but I am also a seeker. Mine is very student, classroom, family related. What will make a difference in their lives? And so I seek out things for that purpose, but I also try to collaborate with friends who are early adopters and who tell me, oh, Caroline, you need to check this out. So Lauren Enders has been wonderful about just sending me links to apps that she knows I'm going to love and use creatively. And Laurel Buell does the same thing. So just doing that type of thing has been really, really helpful, having friends. And Deanna Wagner has been my technology buddy. So those three people are really, I am a early adopter for apps, but not for other stuff. And so it really helps to have friends who are. So I'm not scared of it. I just sometimes get a little overwhelmed.
Well, and you don't need to have it all the time, right? It's nice to know who has that. And
exactly. I mean, we've got, just for example, I'm working on AAC in the desert. And I thought, you know what? I don't want to do registration. I don't want to learn to do it. I know I could. That's just, I don't have the time. And so I've had wonderful friends who have jumped in and I've done it with them. So they are teaching me to fish, but I don't have to fish tomorrow. I can they're going to serve me up some really good fresh caught fish and I'm going to love it. It's going to be delicious. And I am learning to fish. And so if I had to do it in the future, maybe I could, but that's just a perfect example of, doing Google Forms, because it's going to be very complex, because it's going to be, are you a parent? Because there's a special rate. Are you group of 5? Are you, are you using a purchase order? So it's quite complex. And one of my colleagues figured out the trick to do that complexity and make it work without pain.
There you go.
So Caroline, I know we've talked a little bit privately about this, and I want your take on it. I feel like as professionals, we get more and more put on our plate. Oh, now you have to do this. Oh, here's more paperwork. Oh, we're back. You have a higher caseload. Now you're serving kids online, homebound, and at the school. Off you go. Your caseload's 80 or whatever. And the work is never done. And so burnout is real. And we do have people burning out, but I know that you have made, and I'm sure that you bought into that at some point in your career. I don't think anyone's immune to just not doing an 80-hour week at some point, but in this little weird world that we're in, but I feel like you've made some intentional decisions around work life balance. What advice do you have for some of us that are bonkers?
Okay, the first one is, it's not work-life balance. It's life-work balance. When I say life first, it makes me remember that I've got to figure it out. And I'm not saying, I wish that I had, what do you want to tell your earlier self? I want to go back to the years and tell myself this, okay?
This is what
so I'm I am now, because I work, right now I'm not doing 70-hour weeks. It just stopped in September. But up until then, I was doing 70-hour work weeks. I'm now trying to cut it back to 40. But even if you're just doing 40, because I'm doing consulting, I have flexibility. So I've decided I'm going to do some of my work on the weekend and take off a day during the week, because it's so much easier to go out to lunch, to go kayak at the lake, to go on hikes. Nothing's as crowded, right? I want to go to see that wonderful exhibit at the art museum. Oh, I could go on a Thursday, much easier.
Your doctor actually has appointments.
Right. And so I have scheduled a day that I'm not seeing any students. I don't have anything scheduled. That's not to say that I don't schedule stuff. Like one of my days, I'm doing a webinar for a lovely group in Manitoba, and that's great. But the point is, it's not every week that I have a day off during the week. And then the other thing is, I plan my own fun first on the calendar. I learned this about when we first moved here. I love to ski, and I would ski. I had a friend who loved to ski, and she was available. Her schedule was much more flexible than mine. She could go every week, and I couldn't go every week, but I could at least go, once or twice a month. And so I put skiing onto my calendar. And this was when you had a calendar that everybody could see. And I put skiing, exclamation point, exclamation point. And then somebody looked at it and went, oh, we could do it that day because you're just skiing. You could do that another day. And of course, I was furious, but I said yes. And then I thought, no, you schedule your own work first, and you use a code that nobody knows that's skiing, hiking, kayaking, fill in the blank, that you say, meet with MJ, and MJ is your skiing buddy. And then nobody all day. And so, or you're meeting MJ. And so they just think, oh, maybe that's Madison Jr. And it's nobody else's business. But scheduling yourself first is another really big one. And also figuring out ways that you do things where you do not talk about work at all, because a lot of times our friends are work people. And so we end up talking about work a lot, but just finding ways that we don't talk about work much. So I feel like that's and one of the things we do is the first 10 minutes. So I have friends, I've done things like a pedicure and kayak, and the first 10 or 15 minutes, we can just get out that work stuff and talk. And then I'm like, okay, work free. And I just take the shackles off and say work free. And then if one of my friends starts to talk about work, I'm like, work free. Okay, when you're paddling, I can't, but I can at least say it. So we have set a code to stop, because some of us who are really passionate have a really hard time stopping. It's just not healthy. It's just not healthy. We need to have friendships that are not just about work, that are about, it's wonderful if you have your work spouse and you do all kinds of wonderful things together with them. But I went to lunch with Patty and Laurel, and we talked about work. Yeah, it was pretty much zip nada, but we did play Old Maids 3 times. And we had so much fun. There was so much laughing, and also just lots of conversation about our lives and things that we love. And I think that's really important.
That's good advice. That's really good advice.
And then one more. My husband and I started, the first year we were married, we started the Saturday night date. And even if we couldn't afford to do anything, we would leave, we would get a babysitter, and we would just pay for the babysitter, and we go out and park our car somewhere and take a walk or do something. If we couldn't afford a movie or dinner or anything, we still got the babysitter and just spent time by ourselves. And we celebrated 50 years in August. And I think that's that same thing about making time for yourself. So for relationships, it doesn't have to be your spouse. It can be with your children, that there's one night a week that I am not going to a meeting no matter what. We're going to have, Friday night is family fun time or whatever, just figuring out one day that you're going to meet together. All that stuff we know, but don't necessarily do.
That's true. It's about prioritizing certain things and really doing it. I love that. I think we all need that advice, at different times, reminded.
Yes. Reminding ourselves. Yeah.
And I feel like it's also, what's the theme across all of that is be intentional.
It is
It's not,
absolutely the theme.
you're not gonna just be like, next opening in my schedule, I'll get a pedicure. You're never gonna do it. And by the way, that's not self-care for everybody, but you know what I'm saying? It's like if you're just waiting for a cancellation to have me time, it's not gonna happen on the regular enough basis for your mental health, you know?
Right.
I agree. The other thing I do is if I have a cancellation, I get to spend 30 minutes of that for me time. Because, it's right before I had a cancellation today, and I had an early lunch and got to watch an episode of Young Sheldon. So I just treated myself. I thought, I wouldn't have been working on other stuff then anyway. And then I did spend 30 minutes doing some catch up, but I gave myself a treat because I was very sad that it was a cancellation, but then I made myself happy.
Love that. I love that. I think it's also a really good model for others who we're with, right? Whether it's your friends that are seeing, I'm making time for this, your own kids, you're making time for yourself is really important for them to see that's healthy. And that's really good advice. I'm glad you shared that.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, I feel like we have so much more to ask you.
I know.
We had a couple of questions I hope you'll ask.
Yes, okay, let's do it.
Good.
What do you hope? What do we hope we ask?
It was question number 4, which was like, because I really
at the end of your career.
Yeah, at the end of my career, what are the things that I feel like have meant the most? And I really, I love that you asked that because it made me really think about it. And I think that I feel like that. So for me personally, and I won't name the, I don't want to be, proselytizing or advertising, but I got to be part of a curriculum that's just feels like everything I ever did in my whole life came together in that. And I'm doing it with people I just value so deeply. And I've been so excited about that. But I've also been able to add in, some zip and do presentations around it. And that's just been really fun for me. And my advice to other people, so I've already given some about the life work balance, but I also do things like a lot of times people say, how do you get to do, presentations and coaching? How do you get to do that? And I believe that the way to do it is to volunteer to do things like presentations at your school district, presentations at your state organization, presentations at national organizations. That's how I got started. So nobody paid me. I mean, and still I do tons of volunteer presentations still, but I think that doing a lot of volunteering makes a difference. We volunteered at Out and About for years before we start. Now we have some support from some institutional support, but for years it was something, and we were in our 26th year, I think, at doing a community outing group called Out and About. And by the way, I can point this out. It's a free download. The book for how to do it is a free download at Teachers Pay Teachers. So for people who want to start their own community outing group for people who use AAC and their families. And so volunteering, and I have students who have volunteered with me who now are doing a lot of paid work. So I think that's huge too. I mean, that's one of the advices I gave to some of my students who use AAC. How can I get paid? I'm like, you have to volunteer. So she has followed this path of doing paid presentations where she wasn't paid. And now she sometimes gets paid for presentations. And so it really does work. And then the other thing is that collaborating piece that I just was talking about, how, we do that when we collaborate, that we also do joint projects. It isn't just collaborating for information, it's collaborating for creativity, because I think it's more fun if you do that. So I've done a bunch of books on Teachers Pay Teachers, and every single one I've collaborated with other people, and it's just been so much fun. I mean, people have had such great ideas, but we've also done a lot of retreats. And so I've done retreats back in the 70s and early 80s. We would do retreats where people could stay in my house for the weekend, and we did a creativity retreat around developing some really fun software for the PowerPad. And it was just so much fun. We're all working together, and the outcomes were infinitely better than if I think there were 5 of us. Patty King DeBon and I were 2 of them. And the outcomes, had it just been me or just been Patty and I, the outcomes would have been so much less than the fact that we all spent time. So just, maybe a Saturday afternoon where you're going to have lunch and then, just plan some little project that you want to do at your school or whatever, and just have fun with the creativity part, just letting your mind go and being creative and doing what we call unleash your creativity.
Love that. That's a great idea.
The model of doing a module online or going to a conference or that kind of stuff doesn't have time for that. So for me, one of my coworkers here, our whole plane ride home is like that. It's like, how are we going to apply what we learned? Because if we don't apply it in the first 2 weeks of that conference, we're going to forget the whole thing. And our only recollection is going to be, it was great. Oh, I remember feeling so excited when I left there. I don't remember why, and I didn't apply anything, right? But I think
I agree with you more.
Yeah.
I've done that so many times where we really met on the plane flight home. I totally agree. And it made a difference. When we did that, and we also collaborated as a group afterwards, that we shared the handouts from sessions, and then we talked about what we were going to do, what were our action items from a particular session. So we know that sit and get is less, it can motivate us to it can reduce burnout, and that is huge. I mean, I don't want to dismiss the importance of reducing that, but figuring out how can we make a difference when we go back. What's your action plan for making a difference? And that's one of the things that I used to always do, and I need to bring that back. When I do presentations, I always had an action plan that was printed out on the table, and people would write down their action items, because when you just write your things in the notes on page 7 and page 47 and so forth, it's not the same as when you have a one page, I'm going to do this, that then maybe refers back to page 17 or to a particular app or to whatever. So
sometimes your Amazon cart goes, oh yeah. So if you add books and little tidbits throughout a conference to your Amazon cart, and then you get a package and you get home and you're like, really,
that's so true. I've totally done that and been really happy, because then you don't have to buy it right then, but now but at least you've got it. You got that wish list, and you can go. You
remember.
I love that.
Well, and it reminds me of, the total opposite of your presentations. I mean, I just have to say something that's amazing of when you present. It's so interactive. It helps the audience take things home, right, in their mind, because it's not just saying. It's like, here, now you have this bracelet on, and when you hear this, you raise your hand, and it's like you're all in. And those are the things that I remember going back.
I absolutely think if you don't have try-its, you really, it's real. I mean, I just planned a session yesterday with a young woman who uses AAC, and she and I put in, it's a 1-hour session. We took away a lot of the, clinical slides, the research slides, or we have them in there, but we're not going to actually do them. We're going to skip them in the presentation. It'll be in your handout. And we have more. We're going to do this. We're going to do, games to learn AAC, and we're going to do, let's practice. What would you model when you watch this video? If you were working on positive comments or negative comments, what would you do? That when people try it, you're just so much more likely to do it. I completely agree. So even if it's a 1-hour talk, I think it can have ways to try things,
Right. Well, an hour goes so quickly.
Yes,
so, Carolyn, what's something people maybe don't know about you that you would want to share?
Okay. I was thinking about that. And I think it's not what you're expecting me to say, but when I turned 65, I thought, I'm going to make myself a list of my top 5 priorities. And I'm going to try to see if I can make them happen over the next 15 years. Because I figure that when I'm 80, I'm probably not going to be working as much. And so I just figure I want,
not 70 hours.
Being intentional, because I'm not always, and I'm really working. That's one of my big presses for the last few years. And so, and these aren't in any particular order. So number 1 has been woefully not accomplished. It was more international travel. Well, yeah, COVID. Okay. But that, hopefully that'll come back.
You have time.
And I mean international travel because I've been so fortunate to go to Africa, to South Africa, and to go to Dubai and India doing workshops, and I really want to get more workshops where I'm going and helping people spread spread excitement and engagement, etc. So that's one. Another one was I decided that I really wanted to write more books, and Teachers Pay Teachers came out, and it was like, oh, this is meant to be. And so, because I want them to be things that people can actually use, that are easy, that are really clinical, etc. But I'd done, I think 0 new ones. I posted some old ones before COVID, but during the lockdown, I did one every month because, lockdown. And so I really want to do more of that. And I want to be real planful about that. And I want my friends to push me to say, that book you were talking about, Core Language Fun, when is it coming out? Because if people push me or collaborate with me, I'm going to do it. Right. So I really want to do more of that. And that's practical and helpful, and that the books themselves have interactive things in them, because I want to model what I believe. And then another one, and this is going to be a little odd, is that I cannot tell you how much I love working with individuals with Angelman, Rett, or Pitt-Hopkins syndromes. They're so they're under, the expectations are way too low. They have so much more, unbelievably more potential than people often recognize. And because of that, I think they're often underperforming, because people don't presume potential and don't treat them in that, don't help them get the opportunities and the instruction that they need and deserve. And so I've just been loving, and that's gone really well for me since 65. Since just saying that has made it happen. So I'm really loving that one. And then more AAC camps, and I haven't done as good a job. And again, COVID. I was really doing a great job before COVID of going to AAC camps. And one of the things I want to do is work with some teams to write an AAC camp in a box curriculum, where you can just pull out the activities that work for you. So it's AAC and literacy camp, because we've done them. We started doing, when I was here, like in the early 90s, that we did one that was funded by the state of Arizona, and we had lots of different funding for it. It was a week-long camp up in Payson, and it was with the staff that took care of all of the caregiving. And so we as volunteers would go and could just do the really engaging, amazing activities for AAC and early literacy stuff. We were, and it was so amazing. And then the funding went away. And so we started doing some things like if you're interested, go to my website, AAC Intervention, and there's some free downloads to talk about, a weekend camp for almost free. Like, we figured out ways to do camp on a $500 budget. And it was really fun going to the KOA campground and, camping and just having a wonderful time. But I just think that there's something about being at a camp, and especially when the families come. Sarah Rivard has done the most amazing Hannah's Hope camp you can't even imagine, where she brings in the teachers a day early. And so we do PD with the teachers about what we're going to do, the teachers and therapists. Then the families come in, and then part of the time, some of the teachers and therapists do activities with the campers, so the parents don't have to be with them, and they can come to parent PD and group activities where we're modeling the kinds of stuff that are fun to do, where the parents and the siblings are there. We do sessions for siblings, etc. So just this really wonderful, and it's just Thursday through Sunday, and people leave it after lunch on Sunday, but just so powerful. So I want to figure out a way to grow that around the globe, because I think it's just so dang fun.
That sounds fun. We want to hear more about that and all of these.
Those are some lofty goals, Caroline.
Yeah.
There's one I couldn't remember. So I don't know what the fifth one was. I don't know. Anyway.
We'll have to interview you again when you get the fifth one, and then
I'm sure I have it written down somewhere, right?
So we are out of time, but we are so grateful for your time. Clearly you're a busy woman, and to take out your time for us is such a treat. It's so interesting to hear how far the field has come, and how we need to preserve the good pieces from what we've already learned, and how to push the field forward, which is one of the reasons why we did this series at all. So we are so thankful for you and for your time and for your words of wisdom. So thank you for coming on today.
Thanks. It was a delight. You guys are fabulous interviewers. Really fun.
Thank you.